Chapter 13. The Subconscious Mind. The Connecting Link. The 11th Step Toward Riches. The subconscious mind consists of a field of consciousness, in which every impulse of thought that reaches the conscious mind, through any of the five senses, is classified and recorded. The subconscious receives and files sense impressions or thoughts regardless of their nature. You can plant in your subconscious mind any plan, thought, or purpose that you desire to translate into its physical or monetary equivalent. Those desires that have been mixed with emotional feeling and faith in your ability are the ones that are strongest. Therefore, they are the first to which the subconscious responds. The subconscious mind works day and night, and in some way which is not fully understood, the subconscious seems able to draw upon the forces of infinite intelligence for the power to transmute your desires into their physical equivalent. And it does it in the most straightforward and practical way. You cannot entirely control your subconscious mind, but you can hand over to it any plan, desire, or purpose that you wish transformed into concrete form. Refer again to the instructions for using the subconscious mind in Chapter 5, Autosuggestion. Editor's comments. In the chapter on autosuggestion, the four primary methods for planting and reinforcing suggestions in your subconscious are: 1. The formulation and writing out of your desire. 2. The repetition of positive affirmations. 3. The creative visualization of your goal. And 4. By acting as though the goal is already yours. This is the end of the editor's comment. From my research, I have concluded that the subconscious mind is the connecting link between the finite mind of man and infinite intelligence. It is the intermediary through which you may draw upon the forces of infinite intelligence. From my research, I have concluded that the subconscious mind is the connecting link between the finite mind of man and infinite intelligence. It is the intermediary through which you may draw upon the forces of infinite intelligence. Only the subconscious mind contains the process by which mental impulses, thoughts, are modified and changed into their spiritual, energy, equivalent. It alone is the medium through which prayer, desire, may be transmitted to the source capable of answering prayer, infinite intelligence. How to energize your subconscious mind for creative effort. The possibilities of what you can do when you connect creative effort with the subconscious mind are stupendous. They inspire me with awe. I never approach the discussion of the subconscious mind without a feeling of littleness and inferiority, due to the fact that man's entire stock of knowledge on this subject is so pitifully limited. First, you must accept as a reality the existence of the subconscious mind and what it can do for you. This will enable you to understand its possibilities as a medium for transmuting your desires into their physical or monetary equivalent, and then you will comprehend the full significance of the instructions given in Chapter 3, Desire. You will also understand the importance of making your desires clear and putting them in writing. You will understand as well the necessity of persistence in carrying out instructions. The 13 principles that are the basis of this book are the stimuli with which you acquire the ability to reach and to influence your subconscious mind. Do not become discouraged if you cannot do this on your first attempt. Remember that the subconscious mind can be directed only through habit. You have not yet had time to master faith. Be patient. Be persistent. Editor's comments. There are two aspects to Hill's theory of the subconscious mind. One is the concept of the subconscious as the storehouse of all information and thoughts that you have ever experienced. The second is the concept of the subconscious as the gateway to infinite intelligence. In this chapter, Hill focuses primarily on the subconscious as a storehouse. Expanding on the editorial comment about the subconscious mind that appears in the chapter on autosuggestion, Proof that the subconscious is a storehouse of information is confirmed in the use of hypnotherapy by psychiatrists. Through hypnosis, psychiatrists are able to help patients open the door to their subconscious so that they can retrieve information about traumatic situations that have been filtered out or repressed by the conscious mind. Further proof is in the use of hypnosis by law enforcement officials to recapture information such as license plate numbers and other details that the conscious mind of a witness has filtered out. Although results vary from person to person, there is no doubt that the subconscious has access to information that the conscious mind does not. This storehouse aspect of the subconscious is what accounts for some ideas that come to us through creative imagination. In some instances, bits of information and ideas that our conscious mind has forgotten will connect with each other on a subconscious level to create a new idea, and that idea will be received by our creative intelligence, which presents it to us as a flash of inspiration. You can't completely control this process, but you can condition yourself to come up with more and better ideas. It is a fact that a traumatic experience, the result of which creates a strongly planted idea, can influence the way a person thinks and acts. If that is true, then by intentionally using all of your efforts to powerfully plant an idea in your subconscious, you should be able to create what would amount to a good traumatic experience that will influence the way you think and act in a positive way. This is exactly how you develop what Hill calls a money consciousness. If you do everything within your power to strongly, firmly, and with complete faith and conviction plant the idea that you will be successful and achieve your desire, your subconscious will accept and store that idea. If you have planted the idea so strongly that it is the dominant idea in your subconscious, it will influence all of the other ideas and information stored there. When you have given your subconscious this specific direction that it did not have before, it will begin to put together pieces of information, and through your creative intelligence, you will find that you are coming up with more and better plans and ideas to accomplish your goal. But as Hill says, you can do this only through faith and habit. You must write out the affirmation of your goal, and you must repeat it aloud every day with absolute faith and conviction that you can achieve it. You must vividly and creatively visualize yourself achieving your goal, and you must do it every day. You must conduct yourself with the attitude that says you can accomplish your goal, and that you deserve the help of those who can help you to accomplish your goal. And you must conduct yourself in that way every day. If you seriously commit yourself to doing these things, it will change the way you think and act. Your subconscious will do everything it can to transmute your desire into reality, and other people will want to do what they can to help you succeed. This is the end of the editor's comments. Many statements in the chapters on faith and on autosuggestion are repeated here for the benefit of your subconscious mind. Remember, your subconscious mind functions whether you make any effort to influence it or not. This means that thoughts of fear, poverty, and all negative ideas will affect your subconscious mind unless you master these impulses and give it more desirable food on which it may feed. The subconscious mind will not remain idle. If you don't plant desires in your subconscious mind, it will feed on the thoughts that reach it as the result of your neglect. Both negative and positive thoughts are reaching your subconscious mind continuously. These thoughts come from the four sources. 1. Consciously from other people. 2. Your subconscious. 3. Subconsciously from other people. And 4. Infinite intelligence. Every day, all kinds of thought impulses are reaching your subconscious mind without your knowledge. Some of these impulses are negative. Some are positive. Right now, you should be specifically trying to shut off the flow of negative impulses and actively working to influence your subconscious mind through positive impulses of desire. When you achieve this, you will possess the key that unlocks the door to your subconscious mind. Moreover, you will control that door so completely that no undesirable thought may influence your subconscious mind. Everything that you create begins in the form of a thought impulse. You can create nothing that you do not first conceive as a thought. Through the aid of the imagination, thoughts may be assembled into plans. The imagination, when under your control, may be used to create plans or purposes that lead to success in your chosen occupation. All thoughts that you want to turn into success and have planted in the subconscious mind must pass through the imagination and be mixed with faith, your faith in your own abilities. The mixing of faith with a plan or purpose intended for submission to the subconscious mind can only be done through the imagination. From these statements, it should be clear that if you want to make use of your subconscious mind, it will call for the coordination and application of all 13 principles of success that are the basis of this book. Make your positive emotions work for you. The subconscious mind is more susceptible to influence by thought mixed with feeling or emotion than it is by thoughts originating solely in the reasoning portion of the mind. In fact, there is much evidence to support the theory that only emotionalized thoughts have any real influence on the subconscious mind. It is a fact that emotions or feelings rule the majority of people. If it is true that the subconscious mind responds better and faster to thoughts that are well mixed with emotion, it is essential to become familiar with the more important of the emotions. There are 7 major positive emotions and 7 major negative emotions. The negatives get into your thoughts naturally and go directly to your subconscious without any help from you. The positive emotions must be injected by you through the principle of autosuggestion into the thought impulse that you wish to pass on to your subconscious mind. These emotions or feeling impulses may be likened to yeast in a loaf of bread. They are the action element which transforms thought impulses from the passive to the active state. That is why thought impulses that have been well mixed with emotion are acted upon more readily than thought impulses originating in cold reason. Editor's comments. W. Clement Stone, Napoleon Hill's friend, mentor, and business partner, arranged for the publication of many of Napoleon Hill's later writings. The following is adapted from material that appears in 2 of these books, Napoleon Hill's Keys to Success and Believe and Achieve. Enthusiasm is a positive mental attitude, an internal impelling force of intense emotion, a power compelling creation or expression. Being enthusiastic is an impelling external expression of action. When you act enthusiastically, you accentuate the power of suggestion and autosuggestion. The sales manager, public speaker, minister, lawyer, teacher, or executive who acts enthusiastic by speaking in an enthusiastic, sincere manner develops genuine enthusiasm. If you act enthusiastic, your emotions will follow. By filling your conscious mind with enthusiasm, you also impress upon your subconscious mind that your burning obsession and your plan for obtaining it are certain things. Then, if your conscious enthusiasm dims, your subconscious will be there, full of images of your success to help you stoke your conscious fires of enthusiasm once again. This is the end of the editor's comments. You are preparing yourself to influence and control the inner audience of your subconscious mind in order to hand over to it the desire for money, which you wish transmuted into its physical, monetary equivalent. It is essential, therefore, that you understand the method of approach to this inner audience. You must speak its language. It understands best the language of emotion or feeling. Following are the 7 major positive emotions and the 7 major negative emotions. I am listing them here so that you may draw upon the positives and avoid the negatives when giving instructions to your subconscious mind. The 7 major positive emotions. The emotion of desire, the emotion of faith, the emotion of love, the emotion of sex, the emotion of enthusiasm, the emotion of romance, the emotion of hope. There are other positive emotions, but these are the 7 most powerful and the ones most commonly used in creative effort. Master these 7 emotions. They can be mastered only by use, and the other positive emotions will be at your command when you need them. Remember that you are studying a book that is intended to help you develop a money consciousness by filling your mind with positive emotions. The 7 major negative emotions to be avoided. The emotion of fear, the emotion of jealousy, the emotion of hatred, the emotion of revenge, the emotion of greed, the emotion of superstition, the emotion of anger. Positive and negative emotions cannot occupy the mind at the same time. One or the other must dominate. It is your responsibility to make sure that positive emotions constitute the dominating influence of your mind. That is where the law of habit will help you. Form the habit of applying and using the positive emotions. Eventually, they will dominate your mind so completely that the negatives cannot enter it. Only by following these instructions literally and continuously can you gain control over your subconscious mind. The presence of a single negative in your conscious mind is sufficient to destroy all chances of constructive aid from your subconscious mind. Editor's comments. Napoleon Hill's concern about the susceptibility of the subconscious mind to negative thoughts, emotions, and comments is well known to professionals who work with these techniques. In clinical hypnotherapy, there is an axiom referred to as the law of reversed effect, which states that whenever there is a conflict between imagination and willpower, the imagination wins. When you attempt to plant an idea, if the subconscious already harbors a negative, trying to force the new idea has the reverse effect, because the subconscious becomes obsessed with defending its established negative idea. And the harder you try to do something, the more the subconscious resists, and the more difficult it becomes. Even the use of the word try is warned against, because it gives the suggestion to the subconscious of a preconceived failure. The concept of trying implies an ongoing effort. You don't want to try. You want to succeed. If you ask your subconscious to help you try, it may do just that. It may help you try, but it will prevent you from succeeding. Because if you did succeed, then it could no longer help you try, which is what you asked it to do. The cautionary note about using the word try is just one example of the care that should be taken when formulating affirmations and using autosuggestion. The following are some other rules of thumb that most modern experts agree on. 1. Affirmations should always be stated as a positive. Affirm what you do want, not what you don't want. 2. Affirmations work best when they are short and very clear about a single desired goal. Take the time to write, rewrite, and polish your affirmation until you can express your desire in a short statement of precise and well-chosen words. 3. Affirmations should be specific about the desired goal, but not about how to accomplish it. Your subconscious knows better than you what it can do and how it can do it. 4. Do not make unreasonable time demands. Your subconscious can't make anything happen suddenly or now. 5. Just saying the words will have little effect. When you affirm your desire, you must do it with such faith and conviction that your subconscious becomes convinced of how important it is to you. As you affirm your desire to yourself, visualize it in your mind's eye as big as a billboard. Make it big, powerful, and memorable. 6. Repetition of your emotionalized affirmation is crucial. At this time, it is your habit to think one way. By repeating your affirmation often every day, your new way of thinking will begin to be your automatic response. Keep reinforcing it until it becomes second nature to you, and your habit will have become to think the new way, the way you want to think. This is the end of the editor's comments. We form habits based on the degree of reinforcement we receive. Habits make no moral judgments. They can be either good or bad. Both are formed through repetition. If we try something and like the results, we repeat the action. You can replace negative thoughts with positive ones. You can replace inaction with action, and you can form any habit you choose. Your thoughts are the only thing that you can completely control if you choose to do so. You can control your thoughts to control your habits. The secret of effective prayer. Most people resort to prayer only after everything else has failed, or else they pray by a ritual of meaningless words. And because most people who pray do so only after everything else has failed, they go to prayer with their minds filled with fear and doubt. Because fear and doubt are the emotions that are mixed with their prayer, these are the emotions the subconscious mind passes on, and these are the emotions that infinite intelligence receives and acts upon. If you pray for a thing, but as you pray you have fear that you may not receive it, or that your prayer will not be acted upon by infinite intelligence, your prayer will have been in vain. Prayer does sometimes result in the realization of that for which one prays. If you have ever had the experience of receiving something for which you prayed, go back in your memory and recall your actual state of mind while you were praying, and you will know for sure that the theory here described is more than a theory. The method by which you may communicate with infinite intelligence is very similar to the way the vibration of sound is transmitted by radio waves. Sound cannot be transmitted through the atmosphere until it has been changed into a very high rate of vibration. The radio station takes the sound of the human voice and modifies it by stepping up the vibration millions of times. Only in this way can the energy of sound be sent over distances. After this transformation has taken place, the energy, which originally was in the form of vibrations of sound, is broadcast or transmitted as a radio signal. When a radio set receives the high-speed transmission, it then reconverts that energy back to its original slower rate of vibration. And when it is stepped down to its original rate, it vibrates the diaphragm of the speaker, which reproduces the original sound of the voice. The subconscious mind is the intermediary that translates prayers or desires into terms that infinite intelligence can receive. The answer comes back to you in the form of a definite plan or idea for procuring the object of your prayer. When you understand this principle, you know why mere words read from a prayer book cannot serve as an agency of communication between the mind of man and infinite intelligence. Do not expect troubles, as they have a tendency not to disappoint. Chapter 14. The Brain, a broadcasting and receiving station for thought. The 12th step toward riches. It was while I was working with the late Dr. Alexander Graham Bell and Dr. Elmer R. Gates that I first proposed the idea that every human brain is both a broadcasting and receiving station for the vibration of thought. In some way similar to the principle behind the operation of a radio receiver, every human brain is capable of picking up vibrations of thought that are being released by other brains. These are received as hunches and flashes of intuition. As was explained in previous chapters, it is your creative imagination that is the receiving set of your brain, which receives thoughts from your subconscious and, under certain circumstances, receives thoughts released by the brains of others. Your creative imagination is the interconnection between your conscious or reasoning mind and the four sources from which you receive thought stimuli. 1. Consciously from other people. 2. Your subconscious. 3. Subconsciously from other people. And 4. Infinite intelligence. When stimulated or stepped up to a high rate of vibration, the mind becomes more receptive to thoughts that reach it from outside sources. This stepping up process takes place through either the positive emotions or the negative emotions. Through the emotions, the vibrations of thought may be increased. The brain that has been stimulated by emotions functions at a much more rapid rate than it does when that emotion is quieted or absent. The result is the increase of thought to such a pitch that the creative imagination becomes highly receptive to ideas. On the other hand, when the brain is functioning at a rapid rate, it also gives to your own thoughts the emotional feeling that is essential before those thoughts will be picked up and acted upon by your subconscious mind. The subconscious mind is the sending station of the brain, through which vibrations of thought are broadcast. Autosuggestion is the medium by which you may put into operation your sending station. The creative imagination is the receiving set through which the energies of thought are picked up. Editor's comments. The following combines the above concept with the related materials from previous chapters to provide a step-by-step recap of Napoleon Hill's view of the process. 1. The brain is simultaneously both a broadcaster and a receiver. 2. Emotion affects both your ability to send and your ability to receive. When under the effect of strong emotion, the more powerfully you can send thoughts. When under the effect of strong emotion, the more receptive you are to receiving thoughts. 3. When you send thoughts, to where do you send them? You send them to your subconscious by using autosuggestion. 4. When you receive thoughts, where do they come from? They come from your subconscious and you receive them through your creative imagination. 5. Your subconscious mind has two aspects. Your subconscious is a storehouse of information, as explained in the previous chapter. Your subconscious is your connection to infinite intelligence. 6. Infinite intelligence is the medium through which you receive thoughts from other brains. Infinite intelligence is Hill's term for describing the following basic law of physics. Because everything in the universe is made of time, space, energy, or matter, and because matter is just energy in a different form, then everything is actually different parts of the same thing. This means that your subconscious mind, energy, has a common base with every other subconscious mind, energy. 7. Thoughts from other brains come to you as follows. When you are under the effect of a strong emotion and your receiver is especially receptive, sometimes its pull is so strong that it attracts a thought from the subconscious mind of another brain. It is able to do this because infinite intelligence interconnects your subconscious with the subconscious of the other brain. 8. These thoughts from other brains are what we refer to as intuition, hunches, déjà vu, and foreknowledge. Although Hill's explanation depends on the action of an intangible force that cannot be isolated and dissected in a laboratory, neither medical science nor psychology can offer a better explanation for those thoughts that depend on knowledge or information that we do not have. This is the end of the editor's comments. The greatest forces are intangible. In the past, we've depended too much on our physical senses and have limited our knowledge to physical things that we could see, touch, weigh, and measure. I believe we have entered the most marvelous of all ages, an age that will teach us more about the intangible forces of the world about us. Perhaps we shall learn that there is an other self that is more powerful than the physical self we see when we look in a mirror. Many people do not take seriously such intangibles, the things that they cannot perceive through any of their five senses. However, to belittle the idea of forces that are intangible or cannot be explained is to ignore the fact that all of us, every day, are controlled by forces that are unseen and intangible. The whole of mankind has not the power to cope with, nor to control the intangible force wrapped up in the rolling waves of the oceans. We still do not fully understand the intangible force of gravity, which keeps this little Earth suspended in space and keeps us from falling from it, much less have the power to control that force. We are entirely subservient to the intangible force that comes with a thunderstorm, and we are just as helpless in the presence of the intangible force of electricity. We do not understand the intangible force and intelligence wrapped up in the soil of the earth, the force that provides us with every morsel of food we eat, every article of clothing we wear, and every dollar we carry in our pockets. Last but not least, with all of our culture and education, we still understand little or nothing of the greatest of all the intangibles, thought. However, we have begun to learn a good deal about the intricate workings of the physical brain, and the results are stunning. We know that the central switchboard of the human brain, the number of lines that connect the brain cells to each other, is written as the figure 1, followed by 15 million zeros. Dr. C. Judson Herrick of the University of Chicago says, "The figure is so stupendous that astronomical figures, dealing with hundreds of millions of light years, become insignificant by comparison. It has been determined that there are from 10 billion to 14 billion nerve cells in the human cerebral cortex, and we know that these are arranged in definite patterns. These arrangements are not haphazard. They are orderly. It is inconceivable to me that such a network of intricate machinery should be in existence for the sole purpose of carrying on the physical functions connected with the growth and maintenance of the physical body. Is it not likely that the same system, which gives billions of brain cells the media for communication, one with another, also provides the means of communication with other intangible forces?" Editor's comments. In the time since Hill wrote the above comments, we have learned a great deal more about the physical brain and how it operates. We understand much about the chemistry of the brain. We can measure the energies it releases. We know which areas control the various functions of the body and which areas affect memory, emotions, reasoning, and many other subtleties related to the thinking process. Through surgery, medication, and other techniques, we know how to prevent the brain from having certain kinds of thoughts. And we know how to encourage the brain to produce certain other kinds of thoughts when we want it to. For instance, a specific area can be stimulated, and you will have pleasurable thoughts. But we cannot yet control what those pleasurable thoughts will be, and we have no idea what the bits and pieces of information are that go into your pleasurable thoughts. With all of our advanced knowledge about the physical brain, we still don't know how to make it have a specific thought or idea, especially not an original thought or a creative idea. And medical science offers no better theory than Hill's as to how we could have an intuition or hunch made up from information that we don't have and were never exposed to. In short, the physical properties of the brain confirm that it is where the thinking process takes place. But it does not offer the answer to the question of how it happens, or how thoughts from one brain might travel to another. In previous commentaries, we pointed to the laws of physics as they relate to Hill's theory about the interconnectedness of all things. And although this is not meant to be a science lesson, it may reassure you to know that the work of renowned scientists lends support to the idea. Quantum theory deals with subatomic particles so minuscule that they are almost at the level of the basic stuff from which everything is made. Albert Einstein developed what is called the EPR effect. Einstein, Podolsky, and Rosen, and Irish physicist John Stuart Bell proposed Bell's theorem, both of which pertain to the concept that when two linked subatomic particles are separated from each other, when a change is made to particle A, the same change will instantly happen in particle B, even though the two are distant from each other. Another related concept is called the holographic brain or holographic universe, and is named after an unusual quality of holograms. It is a fact that if you cut a hologram in half, you don't get two halves of a picture. You get two separate but complete pictures. Cut either one of those in half, and you get another two complete pictures. Cut other pieces, and again you get whole images. Every part of a hologram has the whole of the information in the original. In the 1970s, Carl Pribram, a neurophysiologist at Stanford University, announced the results of his studies, which suggest that memory is not in a specific part of the brain, but is spread throughout the brain like the image on a holographic plate. At almost the same time, renowned physicist David Bohm proposed that the workings of the universe were like a holographic image, that among all things there is total interconnectivity, and that all things influence all other things. In effect, every part of the universe contains the whole of the universe. That is probably more than enough science for most readers. The point is, Hill was not alone in his conclusion that through some intangible force, your subconscious shares interconnectivity with everything else in the universe. Previously, the example was given of the folds and bumps in a tablecloth, all being different, but all still tablecloth. Here is another way to envision the intangible interconnection of all things. Suppose you were to drill 5 holes in a wall, and have someone outside the room put their fingers and thumb through the holes and wiggle them. If you then bring into your room someone who only believes in tangible things that he or she can see, that person will see 5 separate objects that can move independently of each other. You may tell the person that behind the wall the objects are connected and all part of the same hand, but because they cannot see the connection and disbelieve anything they don't understand, the person will not be convinced. Neither modern medicine, nor psychiatry, nor technology can yet conclusively show us behind the wall. But the fact remains, we have all had a hunch about somebody, and it turns out to be right. A premonition that something will happen, and it does. Or a feeling that something isn't right with someone who is not there with you, and it turns out to be true. How does this information come to us? As mentioned previously, psychologist Carl Jung called the intangible connection the collective unconscious, also called universal subconscious. Others call it the totally unified theory, the great first cause, the universal mind, or spirit, and some see it as another way of describing God. Napoleon Hill calls it infinite intelligence and offers a common-sense explanation that allows you to work with a phenomenon even if it is not completely understood. And that, after all, is what Hill was aiming for, to give you a way to access intangible forces that will help you turn your desire into reality. This is the end of the editor's comments. After this book had been written, just before the manuscript went to the publisher, the New York Times published an editorial showing that at least one great university and one intelligent investigator in the field of mental phenomena are carrying on an organized research through which conclusions have been reached that parallel many of those described in this and the following chapter. The editorial briefly analyzed the work carried on by Dr. J.B. Rhine and his associates at Duke University. From the New York Times. What is telepathy? A month ago, we cited on this page some of the remarkable results achieved by Professor Rhine and his associates in Duke University from more than 100,000 tests to determine the existence of telepathy and clairvoyance. These results were summarized in the first 2 articles in Harper's Magazine. In the second, which has now appeared, the author, E.H. Wright, attempts to summarize what has been learned, or what it seems reasonable to infer, regarding the exact nature of these extrasensory modes of perception. The actual existence of telepathy and clairvoyance now seems to some scientists enormously probable as the result of Rhine's experiments. Various percipients were asked to name as many cards in a special pack as they could without looking at them and without other sensory access to them. About a score of men and women were discovered who could regularly name so many of the cards correctly that there was not one chance in many a million of their having done their feats by luck or accident. But how did they do them? These powers, assuming that they exist, do not seem to be sensory. There is no known organ for them. The experiments work just as well at distances of several hundred miles as they did in the same room. These facts also dispose, in Mr. Wright's opinion, of the attempt to explain telepathy or clairvoyance through any physical theory of radiation. All known forms of radiant energy decline inversely as the square of the distance traversed. Telepathy and clairvoyance do not. But they do vary through physical cause, as our other mental powers do. Contrary to widespread opinion, they do not improve when the percipient is asleep or half asleep, but on the contrary, when he is most wide awake and alert. Rhine discovered that a narcotic will invariably lower a percipient's score, while a stimulant will always send it higher. The most reliable performer apparently cannot make a good score unless he tries to do his best. One conclusion that Wright draws with some confidence is that telepathy and clairvoyance are really one and the same gift. That is, the faculty that sees a card face down on a table seems to be exactly the same one that reads a thought residing only in another mind. There are several grounds for believing this. So far, the two gifts have been found in every person who has either of them. If you have the abilities, both seem to be of equal strength. Screens, walls, distances have no effect at all on either. Wright expresses his hunch that other extrasensory experiences, such as prophetic dreams, premonitions of disaster, and the like, may also prove to be part of the same faculty. The reader is not asked to accept any of these conclusions, but the evidence that Rhine has piled up must remain impressive. In 1927, Dr. J.B. Rhine and his wife, Dr. Louisa E. Rhine, joined Professor William McDougall, chairman of the psychology department at Duke University, to create a lab that would apply strict scientific procedures to the study of psychic phenomena. They developed scientific methodologies and procedures to study, identify, and test individuals who demonstrated unusual abilities. It was Dr. Rhine who coined the term extrasensory perception, ESP, and he adopted the word parapsychology to describe their studies. It is fair to say that the research done at the Rhine lab is some of the most advanced work on the entire subject. In 1962, they created the Foundation for Research into the Nature of Man in order to continue their studies independent of the university and to publish related works. In 1995, the name was changed to the Rhine Research Institute. This is the end of the editor's comments. How to join minds in teamwork. In view of Dr. Rhine's findings about the conditions under which the mind responds to what he terms extrasensory modes of perception, I would like to add my own observations. My associates and I have discovered what we believe to be the ideal conditions under which the mind can be stimulated so that this sixth sense can be made to function in a practical way. To begin with, I should explain that there is a close working alliance between myself and two members of my staff. Through experimentation and practice, we have discovered how to stimulate our minds so that we can, by a process of blending our three minds into one, find the solution to a great variety of problems that are submitted by my clients. The procedure is very simple. We sit down at a conference table, clearly state the nature of the problem we have under consideration, then begin discussing it. Each contributes whatever thoughts may occur by applying the principle used in connection with the invisible counselors described in the next chapter. The strange thing about this method of mind stimulation is that it places each participant in communication with unknown sources of knowledge definitely outside their own experience. If you understand the principle described in the chapter on the mastermind, you of course recognize the round table as being a practical application of the mastermind. This method of mind stimulation, through the discussion of definite subjects between three people, illustrates the simplest and most practical use of the mastermind. When you tap into the power of your mastermind group, you will find that the more you work together, the more each member will learn to anticipate the ideas of others and to connect immediately with their intense enthusiasm and inspiration. You cannot completely control this process, but the more you use it, the more it will come into play. By adopting and following a similar plan, you will be making use of the famous Carnegie formula described in Chapter 1. If it means nothing to you at this time, mark this page and read it again after you have finished the last chapter. Great achievement is usually born of great sacrifice and is never the result of selfishness. Chapter 15. The Sixth Sense, the door to the Temple of Wisdom, the 13th step toward riches. The 13th principle is known as the Sixth Sense, through which infinite intelligence may and will communicate voluntarily without any effort from or demands by the individual. This principle is the apex of the philosophy of success. It can be assimilated, understood, and applied only by first mastering the other 12 principles. The Sixth Sense is that portion of the subconscious mind that has been referred to as the creative imagination. It has also been referred to as the receiving set through which ideas, plans, and thoughts flash into the mind. The flashes are sometimes called hunches or inspirations. The Sixth Sense defies description. It cannot be described to a person who has not mastered the other principles of this philosophy, because such a person has no knowledge and no experience with which the Sixth Sense may be compared. After you have mastered the principles in this book, you will be prepared to accept as truth a statement that may otherwise be incredible to you. Through the Sixth Sense, you will be warned of impending dangers in time to avoid them and notified of opportunities in time to embrace them. As you develop your Sixth Sense, it is almost as though a guardian angel comes to you to be of help and assistance, a guardian angel who will open to you at all times the door to the Temple of Wisdom. Miracles of the Sixth Sense. I am not a believer in, nor an advocate of, miracles, for the simple reason that I have enough knowledge of nature to understand that nature never deviates from her established laws. However, I believe that some of nature's laws are so incomprehensible that they produce what appear to be miracles. The Sixth Sense comes as near to being a miracle as anything I have ever experienced. This much I do know, that there is a power, or a first cause, or an intelligence which permeates every atom of matter and embraces every unit of energy perceptible to man. I know that this infinite intelligence is the thing that converts acorns into oak trees, causes water to flow downhill in response to the law of gravity, follows night with day and winter with summer, each maintaining its proper place and relationship to the other. Through the philosophy explained in this book, this intelligence can help turn your desires into concrete or material form. I know this because I have experimented with it, and I have experienced it. Step by step through the preceding chapters, you have been led to this, the last principle. If you have mastered each of the preceding principles, you are now prepared to accept, without being skeptical, the extraordinary claims made here. If you have not mastered the other principles, you must do so before you may determine definitely whether or not the claims made in this chapter are fact or fiction. Let great people shape your life. I have never completely divested myself of the habit of hero worship. While I was passing through the stage of hero worship, I found myself trying to imitate those whom I most admired. My experience has taught me that the next best thing to being truly great is to emulate the great, to try to act like them, be like them, and feel like them as much as I could. I discovered that the faith with which I tried to imitate my idols gave me great capacity to do so quite successfully. Long before I had ever written a line for publication or delivered a speech in public, I followed the habit of reshaping my own character by trying to imitate the 9 men whose lives and life works had been most impressive to me. These 9 men were Emerson, Paine, Edison, Darwin, Lincoln, Burbank, Napoleon, Ford, and Carnegie. Every night, over a long period of years, I held an imaginary council meeting with this group whom I called my invisible counselors. This is how I did it. Just before going to sleep at night, I would shut my eyes and see, in my imagination, this group of men seated with me around my council table. Here I had not only an opportunity to sit among those whom I considered to be great, but I actually dominated the group by serving as the chairman. I had a very definite purpose in using my imagination in this way. My purpose was to rebuild my own character, so it would become a composite of the characters of my imaginary counselors. Realizing that I had to overcome the handicap of being born and raised in an environment of ignorance and superstition, I deliberately assigned myself the task of voluntary rebirth through the method I have described above. Building character through autosuggestion. I knew, of course, that we all become what we are because of our dominating thoughts and desires. I knew that every deeply seated desire causes a person to find a way to turn that desire into reality. I knew that self-suggestion is a powerful factor in building character. In fact, it is the sole principle through which character is built. With this knowledge of how the mind works, I was fairly well armed with the equipment needed to rebuild my character. In these imaginary council meetings, I called on my cabinet members for the knowledge I wished each to contribute. I would even speak out loud to each of them as follows. Mr. Emerson, I desire to acquire from you the marvelous understanding of nature which distinguished your life. I ask that you impress upon my subconscious mind those qualities you possessed that enabled you to understand and adapt yourself to the laws of nature. Mr. Burbank, I request that you pass on to me the knowledge that enabled you to so harmonize the laws of nature that you caused the cactus to shed its thorns and become an edible food. Give me access to the knowledge that enabled you to make 2 blades of grass grow where but 1 grew before. Napoleon, I desire to acquire from you the marvelous ability you possess to inspire men and will rouse them to greater and more determined spirit of action. I desire also to acquire the spirit of enduring faith, which enabled you to turn defeat into victory and to surmount staggering obstacles. Mr. Payne, I desire to acquire from you the freedom of thought and the courage and clarity with which to express convictions which so distinguished you. Mr. Darwin, I wish to acquire from you the marvelous patience and ability to study cause and effect without bias or prejudice so exemplified by you in the field of natural science. Mr. Lincoln, I desire to build into my own character the keen sense of justice, the untiring spirit of patience, the sense of humor, the human understanding, and the tolerance that were your distinguishing characteristics. Mr. Carnegie, I wish to acquire a thorough understanding of the principles of organized effort, which you use so effectively in the building of a great industrial enterprise. Mr. Ford, I wish to acquire your spirit of persistence, the determination, poise, and self-confidence that have enabled you to master poverty and to organize, unify, and simplify human effort so I may help others to follow in your footsteps. Mr. Edison, I wish to acquire from you the marvelous spirit of faith with which you have uncovered so many of nature's secrets, the spirit of unremitting toil with which you have so often wrested victory from defeat. The startling power of imagination. My method of addressing the members of my imaginary cabinet would vary according to the traits of character I was most interested in acquiring. I studied the records of their lives with painstaking care. After some months of this nightly procedure, I was astounded as each time my imaginary counselors started to become more and more real to me. Each of these 9 men developed individual characteristics that surprised me. For example, Lincoln developed the habit of always being late, then walking around in solemn parade. He always wore an expression of seriousness on his face. Rarely did I see him smile. This was not true of the others. Burbank and Payne often indulged in witty repartee, which seemed at times to shock the other members of the cabinet. On one occasion, Burbank was late. When he came, he was excited with enthusiasm, and explained that he had been late because of an experiment he was making, through which he hoped to be able to grow apples on any sort of tree. Payne chided him by reminding him that it was an apple that started all the trouble between man and woman. Darwin chuckled as he suggested that Payne should watch out for little serpents when he went into the forest to gather apples, as they had the habit of growing into big snakes. Emerson observed, "No serpents, no apples," and Napoleon remarked, "No apples, no state." These meetings became so realistic that I became fearful of their consequences and discontinued them for several months. The experiences were so uncanny, I was afraid that if I continued them, I would lose sight of the fact that the meetings were purely experiences of my imagination. In writing this book, this is the first time that I've had the courage to mention this. I knew from my own attitude in connection with such matters that I would be misunderstood if I described my unusual experience. I now have the courage to put this on the printed page, because I am now less concerned about what they say than I was in the years that have passed. While the members of my cabinet may be purely fictional, and the meetings existed only in my own imagination, they have led me into glorious paths of adventure, rekindled my appreciation of true greatness, encouraged my creativity, and inspired me to be honest and bold in expressing my thoughts. Editor's comments. Napoleon Hill's experience with his imaginary counselors is not as uncommon as it may seem on first reading. In fact, it happens to novelists all the time. As an author proceeds with the writing of a book, there will come a point when the characters in the novel become so well defined in the author's mind that the personalities of the characters themselves begin to suggest plot points and dialogue that the author never planned. Often the thoughts that come to the author when he or she is in the character are completely original, and in real life would never have occurred to the author. Psychiatrists, therapists, and motivational experts also use this phenomenon when they work with role-playing. The usual procedure is to ask two people to act out a scenario as if they were in each other's shoes. If this is done in a situation where the participants do not feel embarrassed or self-conscious, and if the people will allow themselves to become submerged and seriously try to become the other person, the results can be stunning. Depending on the faith with which you approach it, you can get not just a general sense of what the other person is going through, but also have flashes of insight, actually feel what the other person feels, and gain a real understanding about the reactions or motivations of others. Why it works is just as much a mystery as why you get hunches. It may be simply that when your imagination creates a character, it doesn't give the character inhibitions, so when you think through the character, your mind is less restricted. Regardless, the fact is that by using your imagination to project yourself into other characters, you can open yourself to ideas that you don't normally have access to, and you can use this mental phenomenon as one of the tools that will help you turn your desire into success. This is the end of the editor's comments. Tapping the source of inspiration. Somewhere in the cell structure of the brain is something that receives the vibrations of thought ordinarily called hunches. So far, science has not discovered where this sixth sense is located, but this is not important. The fact remains that human beings do receive accurate knowledge through sources other than the physical senses. Generally, such knowledge is received when the mind is under the influence of extraordinary stimulation. Any emergency that arouses the emotions and causes the heart to beat more rapidly may bring the sixth sense into action. Anyone who has experienced a near accident while driving knows that the sixth sense often comes to your rescue and by split seconds helps to avoid the accident. I mention this as background to the following statement of fact. On many occasions when I have faced emergencies, some of them so grave that my life was in jeopardy, I have been miraculously guided past these difficulties through the influence of my invisible counselors. My original purpose in conducting council meetings with imaginary beings was solely to use autosuggestion to impress upon my subconscious mind certain characteristics that I wanted to acquire. In more recent years, my experimentation has taken on an entirely different trend. I now go to my imaginary counselors with every difficult problem that confronts me and my clients. During my meetings with these invisible counselors, I find my mind most receptive to ideas, thoughts, and knowledge that reach me through the sixth sense. The results are often astonishing, although I do not depend entirely on this form of counsel. The sixth sense is not something that one can take off and put on at will. Ability to use this great power comes slowly, through application of the other principles outlined in this book. No matter who you are, or what may have been your purpose in reading this book, you can profit by it even if you don't fully understand how or why the principle described in this chapter works. This is especially true if your major purpose is that of accumulation of money or other material things. This chapter on the sixth sense was written because the book is designed to present a complete philosophy by which individuals may unerringly guide themselves in attaining whatever they ask of life. The starting point of all achievement is desire. The finishing point is the kind of knowledge that leads to understanding. Understanding of yourself, understanding of others, understanding of the laws of nature, and the recognition and understanding of happiness. Full understanding of this comes only through familiarity with and use of the principle of the sixth sense. In reading this chapter, you may have found yourself lifted to a high level of mental stimulation. Splendid! Come back to this again a month from now, read it once more, and observe that your mind will soar to a still higher level of stimulation. Repeat this experience from time to time, giving no concern as to how much or how little you learn at the time. Eventually, you will find yourself in possession of a power that will enable you to throw off discouragement, master fear, overcome procrastination, and draw freely upon your imagination. Then you will have felt the touch of that unknown something that has been the moving spirit of every truly great thinker, leader, artist, musician, writer, or statesman. Then you will be in a position to transmute your desires into their physical or financial counterpart as easily as you may lie down and quit at the first sign of opposition. The man who actually knows just what he wants in life has already gone a long way toward attaining it. Chapter 16. The Six Ghosts of Fear. How many are standing in your way? Take inventory of yourself as you read this closing chapter, and find out how many of the ghosts are standing in your way. Before you can put any portion of this philosophy into successful use, your mind must be prepared to receive it. The preparation is not difficult. It begins with study, analysis, and understanding of three enemies that you will have to clear out: indecision, doubt, and fear. The sixth sense will never function while these three negatives, or any one of them, remain in your mind. The members of this unholy trio are closely related. Where one is found, the other two are close at hand. Indecision is the seedling of fear. Remember this as you read. Indecision crystallizes into doubt. The two blend and become fear. The blending process often is slow. This is one reason why these three enemies are so dangerous. They germinate and grow without their presence being observed. The remainder of this chapter describes a state of mind that you must attain before the philosophy can be put into practical use. This chapter also analyzes a condition that has reduced huge numbers of people to poverty, and it states a truth that must be understood by all who accumulate riches, whether measured in terms of money or in terms of a state of mind that may be of far greater value than money. The purpose of this chapter is to turn the spotlight of attention on the cause and the cure of the 6 basic fears. Before you can master an enemy, you must know its name, its habits, and where to attack it. As you read, analyze yourself carefully and determine which, if any, of the 6 common fears have attached themselves to you. And keep in mind that sometimes they are hidden in the subconscious mind, where they are difficult to locate and still more difficult to eliminate. The 6 basic fears. There are 6 basic fears. At one time or another, every person suffers from some combination of these fears. Most people are fortunate if they do not suffer from the entire 6. Named in the order of their most common appearance, they are the fear of poverty, the fear of criticism, the fear of ill health, the fear of loss of love of someone, the fear of old age, and the fear of death. All other fears are of minor importance, and are in fact just variations on these 6. Fears are nothing more than states of mind. Your state of mind is subject to your control and direction. You can create nothing that you do not first conceive in the form of an impulse of thought. The following statement is of even greater importance. Thought impulses begin immediately to translate themselves into their physical equivalent, whether those thoughts are voluntary or involuntary. Even thought impulses that are picked up by mere chance, thoughts that have been released by other minds, may determine your financial, business, professional, or social destiny just as surely as the thoughts that you create by intent and design. This circumstance also explains why some people seem to be lucky, while others of equal or greater ability, training, experience, and brain capacity seem destined to have misfortune. The explanation is that you have the ability to completely control your own mind. With this control, you may open your mind to the thought impulses that are being released by other brains, or you can close the doors tightly and admit only thought impulses of your own choice. Nature has endowed human beings with absolute control over only one thing, and that one thing is thought. This fact, coupled with the additional fact that everything we create begins in the form of a thought, leads us very near to the principle by which fear may be mastered. If it is true that all thought has a tendency to clothe itself in its physical equivalent, and this is true beyond any reasonable room for doubt, it is equally true that thought impulses of fear and poverty cannot be translated into terms of courage and financial gain. The first basic fear, the fear of poverty. There can be no compromise between poverty and riches. The two roads that lead to poverty and riches travel in opposite directions. If you want riches, you must refuse to accept any circumstance that leads toward poverty. The word riches is used in its broadest sense, meaning financial, spiritual, mental, and material wealth. The starting point of the path that leads to riches is desire. In Chapter 3, you received full instructions for the proper use of desire. In this chapter on fear, you have complete instructions for preparing your mind to make practical use of desire. Here is the place to give yourself a challenge, which will definitely determine how much of this philosophy you have absorbed. Here is the point at which you can tell what the future holds in store for you. If, after reading this chapter, you are willing to accept poverty, you may as well make up your mind to receive poverty. This is one decision you cannot avoid. But if you demand riches, determine what form and how much will be required to satisfy you. You know the road that leads to riches. You have been given a road map. If you follow it, it will keep you on that road. If you neglect to make the start, or stop before you arrive, no one will be to blame but you. This responsibility is yours. No excuse will save you from accepting the responsibility if you now fail or refuse to demand riches of life. All you need is one thing. Incidentally, the only thing you can control, and that is a state of mind. A state of mind is something that is up to you. It cannot be purchased. It must be created. The most destructive fear. Fear of poverty is a state of mind, nothing else. But it is sufficient to destroy your chances of achievement in any undertaking. This fear paralyzes your ability to use reason, destroys the imagination, kills off self-reliance, undermines enthusiasm, discourages initiative, leads to uncertainty of purpose, encourages procrastination, wipes out enthusiasm, and makes self-control an impossibility. It takes the charm from your personality, destroys the possibility of accurate thinking, diverts concentration of effort. It defeats persistence, turns willpower into nothingness, destroys ambition, clouds the memory, and invites failure in every conceivable form. It kills love and assassinates the finer emotions of the heart, discourages friendship and invites disaster in 100 forms, leads to sleeplessness, misery, and unhappiness, and all this despite the obvious truth that you live in a world of overabundance of everything your heart could desire, with nothing standing between you and your desires except lack of a definite purpose. The fear of poverty is, without doubt, the most destructive of the 6 basic fears. It has been placed at the head of the list because it is the most difficult to master. The fear of poverty grew out of our inherited tendency to prey upon our fellow human beings economically. Nearly all animals lower than us are motivated by instinct, but their capacity to think is limited, and therefore they prey upon one another physically. We, with our superior sense of intuition, with the capacity to think and to reason, do not eat others bodily. Human beings get more satisfaction out of eating others financially. Humans are so avaricious that every conceivable law has been passed to safeguard us from one another. Nothing brings so much suffering and humility as poverty. Only those who have experienced poverty understand the full meaning of this. It is no wonder that we fear poverty. Through a long line of inherited experiences, we have learned for sure that some people cannot be trusted where matters of money and earthly possessions are concerned. So eager are we to possess wealth that we will acquire it in whatever manner we can, through legal methods if possible, through other methods if necessary or expedient. Self-analysis may disclose weaknesses that you do not like to acknowledge, but this form of examination is essential if you are going to demand of life more than mediocrity and poverty. Remember, as you check yourself point by point, that you are both the court and the jury, the prosecuting attorney and the attorney for the defense, and that you are both the plaintiff and the defendant. You are on trial. Face the facts squarely. Ask yourself definite questions and demand direct replies. When the examination is over, you will know more about yourself. If you do not feel that you can be an impartial judge, call upon someone who knows you well to serve as judge while you cross-examine yourself. You are after the truth. Get it, no matter at what the cost, even though it may temporarily embarrass you. The majority of people, if asked what they fear most, would reply, "I fear nothing." The reply would be inaccurate, because few people realize that they are bound, handicapped, whipped spiritually and physically through some form of fear. So subtle and deeply seated is the emotion of fear that you may go through life and never recognize its presence. Only a courageous analysis will disclose the presence of this universal enemy. When you begin such an analysis, search deeply into your character. The following is a list of the symptoms to look for. Symptoms of the fear of poverty. 1. Indifference. Commonly expressed through lack of ambition, willingness to tolerate poverty, and the acceptance of whatever compensation life may offer without protest. Also mental and physical laziness, and lack of initiative, imagination, enthusiasm, and self-control. 2. Indecision. The habit of permitting others to do your thinking, sitting on the fence. 3. Doubt. Generally expressed through alibis and excuses designed to cover up, explain away, or apologize for your failures. Sometimes expressed in the form of envy of those who are successful, or by criticizing them. 4. Worry. Usually expressed by finding fault with others, a tendency to spend beyond your income, neglect of personal appearance, scowling and frowning, nervousness, lack of poise, self-consciousness, and often the use of alcohol or drugs. 5. Overcaution. The habit of looking for the negative side of every circumstance, thinking and talking about possible failure instead of concentrating on succeeding, knowing all the roads to disaster, but never searching for the plans to avoid failure, waiting for the right time to begin until the waiting becomes a permanent habit, remembering those who have failed and forgetting those who have succeeded, seeing the hole in the donut, but overlooking the donut around the hole. 6. Procrastination. The habit of putting off until tomorrow that which should have been done last year, spending more time in creating excuses than it would take to do the job. This symptom is closely related to overcaution, doubt, and worry. Refusal to accept responsibility. Willingness to compromise rather than put up a fight. Compromising with difficulties instead of harnessing and using them as stepping stones to advancement. Bargaining with life for a penny instead of demanding prosperity, opulence, riches, contentment, and happiness. Planning what to do if you fail instead of burning all bridges and making retreat impossible. Weakness of, and often total lack of, self-confidence, definiteness of purpose, self-control, initiative, enthusiasm, ambition, thrift, and sound reasoning ability. Expecting poverty instead of demanding riches. Associating with those who accept poverty instead of seeking the company of those who demand and receive riches. Money talks. Some will ask, why did you write a book about money? Why measure riches in dollars alone? Some will believe, and rightly so, that there are other forms of riches more desirable than money. Yes, there are riches that cannot be measured in terms of dollars. But there are also millions of people who say, "Give me all the money I need, and I will find everything else I want." The major reason why I wrote this book on how to get money is that millions of men and women are paralyzed with the fear of poverty. What this sort of fear does to one was well described by Westbrook Pegler. Editor's comments. James Westbrook Pegler was a controversial newspaper columnist for the Chicago Daily News and the Washington Post. Although his career lasted into the 1960s, he was most widely read and quoted during the 1930s and 1940s. During that period, he went from being a public supporter of Franklin Roosevelt and the New Deal policies to the opposite end of the political spectrum, championing conservative points of view. Pegler was also the author of 3 books based on his columns, and in 1940 won the Pulitzer Prize for his expose of union racketeering. This is the end of the editor's comments. We continue with the article by Westbrook Pegler. Money is only clamshells or metal discs or scraps of paper, and there are treasures of the heart and soul which money cannot buy. But most people, being broke, are unable to keep this in mind and sustain their spirits. When a man is down and out and on the street, unable to get any job at all, something happens to his spirit, which can be observed in the droop of his shoulders, the set of his hat, his walk, and his gaze. He cannot escape a feeling of inferiority among people with regular employment, even though he knows they are definitely not his equals in character, intelligence, or ability. These people, even his friends, feel, on the other hand, a sense of superiority and regard him, perhaps unconsciously, as a casualty. He may borrow for a time, but not enough to carry on in his accustomed way, and he cannot continue to borrow very long. But borrowing in itself, when a man is borrowing merely to live, is a depressing experience, and the money lacks the power of earned money to revive his spirits. Of course, none of this applies to bums or habitual ne'er-do-wells, but only to men of normal ambitions and self-respect. Women in the same predicament must be different. We somehow do not think of women at all in considering the down-and-outers. They are scarce in the bread lines, they rarely are seen begging on the streets, and they are not recognizable in crowds by the same plain signs which identify busted men. Of course, I do not mean the shuffling hags of the city streets, who are the opposite number of the confirmed male bums. I mean reasonably young, decent, and intelligent women. There must be many of them, but their despair is not apparent. When a man is down and out, he has time on his hands for brooding. He may travel miles to see a man about a job and discover that the job is filled, or that it is one of those jobs with no base pay, but only a commission on the sale of some useless knick-knack which nobody would buy except out of pity. Turning that down, he finds himself back on the street with nowhere to go, but just anywhere. So he walks and walks. He gazes into store windows at luxuries which are not for him, and feels inferior and gives way to people who stop to look with an active interest. He wanders into the railroad station, or puts himself down in the library to ease his legs and soak up a little heat, but that isn't looking for a job, so he gets going again. He may not know it, but his aimlessness would give him away even if the very lines of his figure did not. He may be well dressed in the clothes left over from the days when he had a steady job, but the clothes cannot disguise the droop. He sees thousands of other people, bookkeepers or clerks or chemists or wagon hands, busy at their work, and envies them from the bottom of his soul. They have their independence, their self-respect and manhood, and he simply cannot convince himself that he is a good man too, though he argue it out and arrive at a favorable verdict hour after hour. It is just money which makes this difference in him. With a little money, he would be himself again. This is the end of the article by Westbrook Pegler. The second basic fear, the fear of criticism. Just how we originally came by this fear, no one can say definitely, but one thing is certain, we have it in a highly developed form. I am inclined to attribute the basic fear of criticism to that part of our inherited nature that prompts us not only to take away other people's goods and wares, but also to justify our actions by criticism of the character of others. It is well known that a thief will criticize the man from whom he steals, that politicians seek office not by displaying their own virtues and qualifications, but by running negative campaigns against their opponents. Designers and clothing manufacturers have not been slow to take advantage of this basic fear of criticism. Every season, styles change. Who establishes the styles? Certainly not the purchaser. It is the designers and manufacturers. Why do they change the styles so often? The answer is obvious. They change the styles so they can sell more clothes. The fear of criticism robs people of their initiative, destroys their power of imagination, limits their individuality, takes away their self-reliance, and does them damage in 100 other ways. Parents often do their children irreparable injury by criticizing them. The mother of one of my friends used to punish him with a switch almost daily, always completing the job with the statement, "You'll land in the penitentiary before you are 20. He was sent to a reformatory at the age of 17. Editor's comments. Modern psychotherapy is well aware of the circumstance that Hill describes in the preceding paragraph. In the chapters on autosuggestion and hypnosis, reference was made to childhood traumas that result in phobias, compulsive behaviors, fixations, or complexes. However, there are instances in which the implanting of a suggestion is much more subtle. Hypnotherapists have found that common phrases such as, "Don't you ever say no to me again," "I'm afraid she'll never get over it," or "You're just like your father," can hamper a person's abilities later in life if such phrases were said often enough, or at a time when a child was particularly vulnerable. This is the end of the editor's comments. Criticism is the one form of service of which everyone has too much. Everyone has a stock of it, which is handed out gratis whether called for or not. Your nearest relatives are often the worst offenders. It should be recognized as a crime. In reality, it is a crime of the worst nature for any parent to build inferiority complexes in the mind of a child through unnecessary criticism. Employers who understand human nature get the best there is in people not by criticism, but by constructive suggestion. Parents may accomplish the same results with their children. Criticism will plant fear in the human heart, or resentment, but it will not build love or affection. Symptoms of the fear of criticism. This fear is almost as universal as the fear of poverty, and its effects are just as fatal to personal achievement, mainly because this fear destroys initiative and discourages the use of imagination. The major symptoms of the fear are: 1. Self-consciousness, generally expressed through nervousness, timidity in conversation and in meeting strangers, awkward movements, and shifting of the eyes. 2. Lack of poise, expressed through lack of voice control, nervousness in the presence of others, poor posture, poor memory. 3. Personality weaknesses, lacking in firmness of decision, personal charm, and ability to express opinions definitely, the habit of sidestepping issues instead of meeting them squarely, agreeing with others without careful examination of their opinions. 4. Inferiority complex, the habit of expressing your own self-approval as a means of covering up your feeling of inferiority, using big words to impress others, often without knowing the real meaning of the words, imitating others in dress, speech, and manners, boasting of imaginary achievements, and acting superior to cover up the fact that you feel inferior. 5. Extravagance, the habit of trying to keep up with the Joneses and spending beyond your income. 6. Lack of initiative, failure to embrace opportunities for self-advancement, fear to express opinions, lack of confidence in your own ideas, giving evasive answers to questions asked by superiors, hesitancy of manner and speech, deceit in both words and deeds. 7. Lack of ambition, mental and physical laziness, lack of self-assertion, slowness in reaching decisions, being too easily influenced, the habit of accepting defeat without protest, or quitting an undertaking when opposed by others. Also the habit of criticizing others behind their backs and flattering them to their faces, suspicion of other people without cause, lack of tactfulness of manner and speech, and unwillingness to accept the blame for mistakes. The third basic fear, the fear of ill health. This fear may be traced to both physical and social heredity. It is closely associated with the causes of fear of old age and the fear of death. We fear ill health because of the terrible pictures that have been planted in our minds of what may happen if death should overtake us. We also fear it because of the economic toll that it may claim. One reputable physician estimated that 75% of all people who visit doctors are suffering with hypochondria, imaginary illness. It has been shown that the fear of disease, even when there is not the slightest cause for fear, often produces the physical symptoms of the disease feared. Powerful and mighty is the human mind. It builds or it destroys. Through a series of experiments, my staff proved how susceptible people are to the power of suggestion. We asked 3 acquaintances to visit separately with the victim. They were instructed to pose the question, "What ails you? You look terribly ill." The first questioner provoked a grin from him and a nonchalant, "Oh, nothing, I'm all right." The second questioner was answered with a statement, "I don't know exactly, but I do feel badly." The third questioner was met with the admission that the victim was actually feeling ill. Editor's comment. Hill's experiment is one that you do not want to carry too far. It is not that different from the principle behind certain religious sects whose members take vengeance on their enemies by hexing or placing a spell on a victim. The spell only works because the victim believes that spells can be cast and that it is possible he or she could be hexed. When the hex victim is informed that someone has cast a spell on them, they accept that it is possible, and their mind does the rest. The same theory operated when Hill's associate was told 3 times that he looked ill. He believed it was possible. Being told 3 times was convincing, and his mind went to work and made it so. This is the end of the editor's comment. There is overwhelming evidence that disease sometimes begins in the form of negative thought impulse. Such thoughts may be planted in your mind by suggestion or created by you in your own mind. Doctors send patients to new climates for their health because a change of mental attitude is necessary. The seed of fear of ill health lives in every human mind. Worry, fear, discouragement, or disappointment can cause this seed to germinate and grow. Symptoms of the fear of ill health. The symptoms of this almost universal fear are 1. Autosuggestion. The habit of negative use of self-suggestion by looking for and expecting to find symptoms of all kinds of disease. Enjoying your imaginary illness and speaking of it as being real. The habit of trying fads and isms recommended by others as having therapeutic value. Talking to others of operations, accidents, and other forms of illness. Experimenting with diets, physical exercises, weight loss systems without professional guidance. Trying home remedies, patent medicines, and quack remedies. 2. Hypochondria, a medical term for imaginary disease. The habit of excessively talking about illness, and by concentrating the mind on disease, you begin to expect it to happen to you. Nothing that comes in bottles can cure this condition. It is brought on by negative thinking, and nothing but positive thought can cure it. Hypochondria is said to do as much damage on occasion as the real disease might do. 3. Exercise. Fear of ill health often interferes with proper physical exercise and results in overweight. 4. Susceptibility. Fear of ill health breaks down your natural resistance, which makes you susceptible to real disease. The fear of ill health is often related to the fear of poverty, especially in the case of the hypochondriac, who constantly worries about the possibility of having to pay doctor's bills, hospital bills, etc. This type of person spends much time preparing for sickness, talking about death, saving money for cemetery plots, burial expenses, and such. 5. Self-coddling. The habit of seeking sympathy. The habit of feigning illness to cover your laziness, or to serve as an alibi for lack of ambition. People often resort to this trick to avoid work. 6. Intemperance. The habit of using alcohol or drugs to destroy pain instead of eliminating the cause. 7. The habit of reading about illness and worrying over the possibility of being stricken by it. The fourth basic fear. The fear of loss of love. Jealousy and other similar forms of neurosis grow out of our fear of the loss of love of someone. This fear is the most painful of all the 6 basic fears. It probably plays more havoc with the body and mind than any of the other basic fears. Editor's comment. By way of introduction to each of the 6 basic fears, Napoleon Hill usually postulates how the fear originated in humans. In the original edition of this book, he suggested that the fear of loss of love may have started with prehistoric man's habit of stealing his neighbor's mate and taking liberties with her whenever he could. Though amusing, this theory does not take into account that women fear the loss of a love just as profoundly as men do, and both men and women fear losing the love of not just their mates, but also of family members and others with whom they are close. How the emotion of love originated may remain a mystery, but there is no mystery about how we feel when we lose it. This is the end of the editor's comment. The fourth basic fear. The fear of loss of love. Jealousy and other similar forms of neurosis grow out of our fear of the loss of love of someone. This fear is the most painful of all the 6 basic fears. It probably plays more havoc with the body and mind than any of the other basic fears. Editor's comment. By way of introduction to each of the 6 basic fears, Napoleon Hill usually postulates how the fear originated in humans. In the original edition of this book, he suggested that the fear of loss of love may have started with prehistoric man's habit of stealing his neighbor's mate and taking liberties with her whenever he could. Though amusing, this theory does not take into account that women fear the loss of a love just as profoundly as men do, and both men and women fear losing the love of not just their mates, but also of family members and others with whom they are close. How the emotion of love originated may remain a mystery, but there is no mystery about how we feel when we lose it. This is the end of the editor's comment. Symptoms of the fear of loss of love. The distinguishing symptoms of this fear are 1. Jealousy. The habit of being suspicious of friends and loved ones. The habit of accusing wife or husband of infidelity without grounds. General suspicion of everyone and absolute faith in no one. 2. Fault-finding. The habit of finding fault with friends, relatives, business associates, and loved ones upon the slightest provocation, or without any cause whatsoever. 3. Gambling. The habit of gambling, stealing, cheating, and otherwise taking hazardous chances to provide money for loved ones in the belief that love can be bought. The habit of spending beyond your means, or incurring debts to provide gifts for loved ones in order to make a good impression. Also insomnia, nervousness, lack of persistence, weakness of will, lack of self-control, lack of self-reliance, bad temper. The fifth basic fear. The fear of old age. In the main, this fear grows out of 2 sources. First, the thought that old age may bring with it poverty. Second is the concern that many have for what may await them in the world beyond. The most common cause of fear of old age is associated with the possibility of poverty. Poorhouse is not a pretty word. It throws a chill into the mind of every person who faces the possibility of having to spend declining years having to live on some form of charity. The possibility of ill health, which is more common as people grow older, is also a contributing cause of this common fear of old age, as is concern about diminishing sexuality. Another contributing cause of the fear of old age is the possibility of loss of freedom and independence, as old age may bring with it the loss of both physical and economic freedom. Symptoms of the fear of old age. The most common symptoms of this fear are: 1. Lack of enthusiasm. The tendency to slow down and develop an inferiority complex, falsely believing you are slipping because of age. The habit of killing off initiative, imagination, and self-reliance by falsely believing you are too old to exercise these qualities. 2. Self-consciousness of speech. The habit of speaking apologetically of yourself as being old merely because you have reached the age of 40 or 50, instead of reversing the rule and expressing gratitude for having reached the age of wisdom and understanding. 3. Inappropriate dress and action. Trying to appear much younger than your age by going overboard in your attempt to keep up with the style and mannerisms of youth. The sixth basic fear: the fear of death. To some, this is the cruelest of all the basic fears. The reason is obvious. The terrible pangs of fear associated with the thought of death, in the majority of cases, may be charged to religious fanaticism. So-called heathens are less afraid of death than the more civilized. For hundreds of millions of years we have been asking the still unanswered questions: where did I come from? And where am I going? During the darker ages of the past, the more cunning and crafty were not slow to offer the answer to these questions for a price. Come into my tent, embrace my faith, accept my dogmas, and I will give you a ticket that will admit you straight into heaven when you die, says the religious leader. Remain out of my tent, says the same leader, and the devil will take you and burn you throughout eternity. The thought of eternal punishment destroys interest in life and makes happiness impossible. While the religious leader may not actually be able to provide safe conduct into heaven or send you to hell, the possibility of the latter seems terrible. The very thought of it takes hold of the imagination in such a realistic way that it paralyzes reason and sets up the fear of death. The fear of death is not as common now as it was during the age when there were no great colleges and universities. People of science have turned the spotlight of truth upon the world, and this truth is rapidly freeing men and women from this terrible fear of death. The young men and women who attend the colleges and universities are not easily impressed by fire and brimstone. Through knowledge, the fears of the dark ages that grip the mind have been dispelled. The entire world is made up of only four things: time, space, energy, and matter. In elementary physics, we learn that neither matter nor energy can be created or destroyed. Both matter and energy can be transformed, but neither can be destroyed. Life is energy, if it is anything. If neither energy nor matter can be destroyed, of course life itself cannot be destroyed. Life, like other forms of energy, may be passed through various processes of transition or change, but it cannot be destroyed. Death is mere transition. And if death is not mere change or transition, then nothing comes after death except a long, eternal, peaceful sleep. And sleep is nothing to be feared. If you can accept the logic of this, you may forever wipe out your fear of death. Symptoms of the fear of death. The general symptoms of this fear are: 1. The habit of thinking about dying, instead of making the most of life. This is generally due to lack of purpose or lack of a suitable occupation. This fear is more prevalent among the aged, but sometimes the more youthful are victims of it. The greatest of all remedies for the fear of death is a burning desire for achievement, backed by useful service to others. A busy person seldom has time to think about dying. A busy person finds life too thrilling to worry about death. 2. Sometimes the fear of death is closely associated with the fear of poverty, where death would leave loved ones poverty-stricken. 3. In other cases, the fear of death is caused by illness and the breakdown of physical body resistance. 4. The most common causes of the fear of death are ill health, poverty, lack of appropriate occupation, disappointment over love, insanity, and religious fanaticism. The disaster of worry and destructive thinking. Worry is a state of mind based upon fear. It works slowly but persistently. It is insidious and subtle. Step by step, it digs itself in until it paralyzes the reasoning faculty and destroys self-confidence and initiative. Worry is a form of sustained fear caused by indecision. Therefore, it is a state of mind that can be controlled. An unsettled mind is helpless. Indecision makes an unsettled mind. Most individuals lack the willpower to reach decisions promptly and to stand by them after they have been made. We do not worry over conditions once we have reached a decision to follow a definite line of action. I once interviewed a man who was sentenced to be electrocuted 2 hours later. The condemned man was the calmest of the 8 men who were in the death cell with him. His calmness prompted me to ask him how it felt to know that he was going into eternity in a short while. With a smile of confidence on his face, he said, "It feels fine. Just think, brother, my troubles will soon be over. I've had nothing but trouble all my life. It has been a hardship to get food and clothing. Soon, I will not need these things. I have felt fine ever since I learned for certain that I must die. I made up my mind then to accept my fate in good spirit." As he spoke, he devoured a dinner sufficient for 3 men, eating every mouthful of the food brought to him, and apparently enjoying it as much as if no disaster awaited him. Decision gave this man resignation to his fate. Decision can also prevent one's acceptance of undesired circumstances. Through indecision, the 6 basic fears become translated into a state of worry. Relieve yourself forever of the fear of death by reaching a decision to accept death as an inescapable event. Eliminate the fear of old age by reaching a decision to accept it not as a handicap, but as a great blessing that carries with it wisdom, self-control, and understanding. Master the fear of loss of love by reaching a decision to get along without love, if that is necessary. Defeat the fear of criticism by reaching a decision not to worry about what other people think, do, or say. Overcome the fear of ill health by the decision to forget symptoms, and whip the fear of poverty by reaching a decision to get along with whatever wealth you can accumulate without worry. Kill the habit of worry in all its forms by reaching a general blanket decision that nothing life has to offer is worth the price of worry. With this decision will come poise, peace of mind, and calmness of thought, which will bring happiness. If your mind is filled with fear, you not only destroy your own chances of intelligent action, but you transmit these destructive vibrations to the minds of all who come into contact with you, and you destroy their chances too. Even a dog or a horse knows when its master lacks courage. It will pick up the vibrations of fear given off by its master and behave accordingly. The vibrations of fear pass from one mind to another just as quickly and as surely as the sound of the human voice passes from the broadcasting station to a radio receiver. The person who constantly speaks of negative or destructive thoughts is practically certain to experience the results of those words in the form of destructive feedback. But even negative thoughts without words will come back to you. The release of destructive thought impulses alone also produces feedback in more ways than one. First, and perhaps most important to be remembered, the person who releases thoughts of a destructive nature must suffer damage through the breaking down of creative imagination. Secondly, the presence in the mind of any destructive emotion develops a negative personality, which repels people and often converts them into antagonists. The third source of damage is that negative thoughts not only affect others, but they also embed themselves in the subconscious mind of the person releasing them and there become a part of that person's character. Your business in life is to achieve success. To be successful, you must find peace of mind, acquire the material needs of life, and above all, attain happiness. All of these indications of success begin in the form of thought impulses. You control your own mind. You have the power to feed it whatever thought impulses you choose. With this goes the responsibility of using your mind constructively. You are the master of your own earthly destiny, just as surely as you have the power to control your own thoughts. You may influence, direct, and eventually control your own environment, making your life what you want it to be. Or you may neglect to make your life what you want, and you will be adrift on the seas of circumstance, where you will be tossed like a wood chip on the waves of the ocean. The Devil's Workshop. In addition to the 6 basic fears, there is another evil by which people suffer. It constitutes a rich soil in which the seeds of failure grow abundantly. It is so subtle that its presence often is not detected. It is more deeply rooted and more often fatal than all of the 6 fears. For want of a better name, let us call this evil susceptibility to negative influences. Those who accumulate great riches always protect themselves against negative influences. The poverty-stricken never do. Those who succeed in any calling must prepare their minds to resist such influences. If you are reading this book to learn how to grow rich, you should examine yourself very carefully to determine whether you are susceptible to negative influences. If you neglect this self-analysis, you will give up your right to attain the object of your desires. Make your analysis searching. As you read the following questions, be tough on yourself. Go at the task as carefully as you would if you were searching for any other enemy you knew was waiting to ambush you. You must deal with your own faults as you would with a real and serious enemy. You can easily protect yourself against real enemies because there are laws, police, and courts to deal with them. But this 7th basic evil is more difficult to master because it strikes when you are not aware of its presence, when you are asleep and while you are awake. Moreover, its weapon is intangible because it consists of merely a state of mind. Negative influences are also dangerous because they come in so many different forms. Sometimes they enter the mind through the well-meant words of your friends and relatives. At other times they come from within, through your own mental attitude. Always it is as deadly as poison, even though it may not kill as quickly. How to protect yourself against negative influences. To protect yourself against negative influences, whether of your own making or the result of negative people around you, recognize that your willpower is your defense. You must put it into constant use until it builds a wall of immunity against negative influences in your own mind. Recognize that you and every other human being are, by nature, lazy, indifferent, and susceptible to all suggestions that reinforce your weaknesses. Recognize that you are, by nature, susceptible to all of the 6 basic fears, and you must set up habits to counteract all these fears. Recognize that negative influences often work on you through your subconscious mind and are therefore difficult to detect. Keep your mind closed against all people who depress or discourage you in any way. Clean out your medicine chest and stop pandering to colds, aches, pains, and imaginary illness. Deliberately seek the company of people who influence you to think and act for yourself. Do not expect troubles, as they have a tendency not to disappoint. Without doubt, the most common weakness of all human beings is the habit of leaving their minds open to the negative influences of other people. This weakness is all the more damaging because most people do not even know they do it. The following list of questions is designed to help you see yourself as you really are. You should read through the list now. Then set aside a day when you can give adequate time to go through the list again and thoroughly answer each question. When you do this, I advise that you read the questions and state your answers aloud so you can hear your own voice. This will make it easier for you to be truthful with yourself. Self-analysis questions. Do you complain often of feeling bad? And if so, what is the cause? Do you find fault with other people at the slightest provocation? Do you frequently make mistakes in your work? And if so, why? Are you sarcastic and offensive in your conversation? Do you deliberately avoid the association of anyone? And if so, why? Do you suffer frequently with indigestion? If so, what is the cause? Does life seem futile and the future hopeless to you? Do you like your occupation? If not, why? Do you often feel self-pity? And if so, why? Are you envious of those who excel you? To which do you devote most time, thinking of success or of failure? Are you gaining or losing self-confidence as you grow older? Do you learn something of value from all mistakes? Are you permitting some relative or acquaintance to worry you? If so, why? Are you sometimes excited about life, and at other times in the depths of despondency? Who has the most inspiring influence upon you, and for what reason? Do you tolerate negative or discouraging influences that you could avoid? Are you careless of your personal appearance? If so, when and why? Have you learned how to ignore your troubles by being too busy to be annoyed by them? Would you call yourself a spineless weakling if you permitted others to do your thinking for you? How many preventable disturbances annoy you, and why do you tolerate them? Do you resort to alcohol, drugs, cigarettes, or other compulsions to quiet your nerves? If so, why do you not try willpower instead? Does anyone nag you? And if so, for what reason? Do you have a definite major purpose? And if so, what is it, and what plan do you have for achieving it? Do you suffer from any of the 6 basic fears? If so, which ones? Have you developed a method to shield yourself against the negative influence of others? Do you use autosuggestion to make your mind positive? Which do you value most, your material possessions or your privilege of controlling your own thoughts? Are you easily influenced by others against your own judgment? Has today added anything of value to your stock of knowledge or state of mind? Do you face squarely the circumstances that make you unhappy, or do you sidestep the responsibility? Do you analyze all mistakes and failures and try to profit by them, or do you take the attitude that this is not your duty? Can you name 3 of your most damaging weaknesses? What are you doing to correct them? Do you encourage other people to bring their worries to you for sympathy? Do you choose from your daily experiences lessons or influences that aid in your personal advancement? Does your presence have a negative influence on other people as a rule? What habits of other people annoy you most? Do you form your own opinions, or do you permit yourself to be influenced by other people? Have you learned how to create a mental state of mind with which you can shield yourself against all discouraging influences? Does your occupation inspire you with faith and hope? Are you conscious of possessing spiritual forces of sufficient power to enable you to keep your mind free from all forms of fear? Does your religion help to keep your mind positive? Do you feel it your duty to share other people's worries? If so, why? If you believe that birds of a feather flock together, what have you learned about yourself by studying the friends whom you attract? What connection, if any, do you see between the people with whom you associate most closely and any unhappiness you may experience? Could it be possible that some person whom you consider to be a friend is, in reality, your worst enemy because of his or her negative influence on your mind? By what rules do you judge who is helpful and who is damaging to you? Are your intimate associates mentally superior or inferior to you? How much time out of every 24 hours do you devote to your occupation, sleep, play and relaxation, acquiring useful knowledge, plain wasted time? Who among your acquaintances encourages you most, cautions you most, discourages you most? What is your greatest worry? Why do you tolerate it? When others offer you free, unsolicited advice, do you accept it without question, or do you analyze their motive? What, above all else, do you most desire? Do you intend to acquire it? Are you willing to subordinate all other desires for this one? How much time daily do you devote to acquiring it? Do you change your mind often? If so, why? Do you usually finish everything you begin? Are you easily impressed by other people's business or professional titles, college degrees, or wealth? Are you easily influenced by what other people think or say about you? Do you cater to people because of their social or financial status? Whom do you believe to be the greatest person living? In what respect is this person superior to yourself? How much time have you devoted to studying and answering these questions? At least one day is necessary for the analysis and the answering of the entire list. If you have answered all these questions truthfully, you know more about yourself than the majority of people. Study the questions carefully. Come back to them once each week for several months, and be astounded at the amount of additional knowledge of great value to yourself you will have gained by the simple method of answering the questions truthfully. If you are not certain about the answers to some of the questions, seek the counsel of those who know you well, especially those who have no motive in flattering you, and see yourself through their eyes. The experience will be astonishing. The one thing over which you have absolute control. You have absolute control over only one thing, and that is your thoughts. This is the most significant and inspiring of all facts known to humans. It reflects our divine nature. This ability to control your thoughts is the sole means by which you may control your own destiny. If you fail to control your own mind, you may be sure you will control nothing else. Your mind is your spiritual estate. Protect and use it with the care to which divine royalty is entitled. You were given your willpower for this purpose. Unfortunately, there is no legal protection against those who, by design or through ignorance, poison the minds of others with negative suggestion. Those with negative minds tried to convince Thomas A. Edison that he could not build a machine that would record and reproduce the human voice, because, they said, no one else has ever produced such a machine. Edison did not believe them. He knew that the mind could produce anything the mind could conceive and believe. That knowledge was the thing that lifted the great Edison above the common herd. Men with negative minds told F.W. Woolworth he would go broke trying to run a store on 5 and 10-cent sales. He did not believe them. He knew that he could do anything within reason if he backed his plans with faith. Exercising his right to keep the negative suggestions of others out of his mind, he piled up a fortune of more than $100 million. Doubting Thomases scoffed scornfully When Henry Ford tried out his first crudely built automobile on the streets of Detroit, some said the thing would never become practical. Others said no one would pay money for such a contraption. Ford said, "I'll belt the earth with dependable motor cars." And he did. For the benefit of those seeking vast riches, let it be remembered that practically the sole difference between Henry Ford and a majority of workers is this: Ford had a mind, and he controlled it. The others have minds that they do not try to control. Mind control is the result of self-discipline and habit. You either control your mind, or it controls you. There is no halfway compromise. The most practical method for controlling your mind is the habit of keeping it busy with a definite purpose, backed by a definite plan. Study the records of those who achieve noteworthy success, and you will see that they have control over their own minds, and that they exercise that control and direct it toward the attainment of definite objectives. Without this control, success is not possible. 55 Famous Alibis by Old Man If. People who do not succeed have one distinguishing trait in common. They know all the reasons for failure and have what they believe to be airtight alibis to explain away their own lack of achievement. Some of these alibis are clever, and a few of them are justifiable by the facts. But alibis cannot be used for money. The world wants to know only one thing: have you achieved success? A character analyst compiled a list of the most commonly used alibis. As you read the list, examine yourself carefully and determine how many of these alibis you use. Remember, the philosophy presented in this book makes every one of these alibis obsolete. If I didn't have a wife and family. If I had enough pull. If I had money. If I had a good education. If I could get a job. If I had good health. If I only had time. If times were better. If other people understood me. If conditions around me were only different. If I could live my life over again. If I did not fear what they would say. If I had been given a chance. If I now had a chance. If other people didn't have it in for me. If nothing happens to stop me. If only I were younger. If I only could do what I want. If I had been born rich. If I could meet the right people. If I had the talent that some people have. If I dared to assert myself. If only I had embraced past opportunities. If people didn't get on my nerves. If I didn't have to keep house and look after the children. If I could save some money. If the boss only appreciated me. If I only had somebody to help me. If my family understood me. If I lived in a big city. If I could just get started. If I were only free. If I had the personality of some people. If I were not so fat. If my real talents were known. If I could just get a break. If I could only get out of debt. If I hadn't failed. If I only knew how. If everybody wasn't against me. If I didn't have so many worries. If I could marry the right person. If people weren't so dumb. If my family were not so extravagant. If I were sure of myself. If luck were not against me. If I had not been born under the wrong star. If it were not true that what is to be will be. If I did not have to work so hard. If I hadn't lost my money. If I lived in a different neighborhood. If I didn't have a past. If I only had a business of my own. If other people would only listen to me. If, and this is the greatest of them all, If I had the courage to see myself as I really am, I would find out what is wrong with me and correct it. And I know that something must be wrong with the way I have done things, or I would already have the success that I desire. I recognize that something must be wrong with me, otherwise I would have spent more time analyzing my weaknesses and less time building alibis to cover them. Building alibis to explain away failure is a national pastime. The habit is as old as the human race and is fatal to success. Why do people cling to their pet alibis? The answer is obvious. They defend their alibis because they create them. Your alibi is the child of your own imagination. It is human nature to defend your own brainchild. Building alibis is a deeply rooted habit. Habits are difficult to break, especially when they provide justification for something we do. Plato had this truth in mind when he said, "The first and best victory is to conquer self. To be conquered by self is, of all things, the most shameful and vile." Another philosopher had the same thought in mind when he said, "It was a great surprise to me when I discovered that most of the ugliness I saw in others was but a reflection of my own nature." Elbert Hubbard, philosopher, author, publisher of the Fra magazine, and founder of the Roycrofters community of artists, said, "It has always been a mystery to me why people spend so much time deliberately fooling themselves by creating alibis to cover their weaknesses. If used differently, this same time would be sufficient to cure the weakness. Then no alibis would be needed." In parting, I would remind you that life is a checkerboard, and the player opposite you is time. If you hesitate before moving, or neglect to move promptly, your men will be wiped off the board by time. You are playing against a partner who will not tolerate indecision. Previously, you may have had a logical excuse for not having forced life to come through with whatever you asked. That alibi is now obsolete, because you are in possession of the master key that unlocks the door to life's riches. The master key is intangible, but it is powerful. It is the privilege of creating, in your own mind, a burning desire for a definite form of riches. There is no penalty for the use of this key, but there is a price you must pay if you do not use it. The price is failure. There is a reward of stupendous proportions if you put the key to use. It is the satisfaction that will come to you when you conquer self and force life to pay whatever is asked. The reward is worthy of your effort. Will you make the start and be convinced? "If we are related," said the immortal Emerson, "we shall meet." In closing, may I borrow his thought and say, if we are related, we have, through these pages, met. Remember that your real wealth can be measured not by what you have, but by what you are.